Hi everyone, I am Kevin Larson. I'm from the Microsoft Advanced Reading Technologies team. The goal of our team is to figure out how to make on-screen reading easier and more pleasant. And we're a bit of an unusual team. We're a small team, but we're made up of people with different capabilities. We have engineers, we have typographers who are trained in the art of type design, and I am a PhD in reading psychology, and I study how people read. This session is intended to be very interactive, and so I am happy to take questions at any point in time during this talk, so please just jump in and I'll go where the audience wants me to go. I'm going to start off with a quiz. Up on screen here, I have, it's the font Georgia, and it's the letter I and the letter O. The letter I in both cases are exactly the same. The letter O are slightly different in size. And one of these is correct and one is wrong. Who can tell me which one? Yeah. We've got one vote for the right one being correct. Why?
Because the O slightly higher than the I, so it's not exactly.
So the base of the O is going a little bit higher than the base of the I and a little bit lower at the bottom. So does that make it correct or make it wrong? Anyone else want to take a guess at this? Got one vote for somebody like it on the left. So you are absolutely correct. What's going on here is the one on the right has what are called undershoots and overshoots, that it goes a little bit beyond the baseline of where the I goes. And the one on the right is the correct one. The one on the left, if you had a whole page of text, even though those O's are mathematically the same size as the I, in a whole page of text, all of those O's would look a little bit small and a little bit wrong. And so what type designers do is take account for tricks of human visual perception. So on the left, many people may be familiar with the Mueller-Lyer illusion, where I can take two lines that you can see here are the longer vertical lines here. They're exactly the same length, but depending on what kind of ending I put onto it, the line can appear to be longer or smaller. And we have the same kind of visual illusion going on with the I and the O, that the O is like these lines that are slightly turned in, so it has a natural appearance of being slightly smaller than it actually is. So to compensate for that, type designers will design it to be a little bit larger. There are lots of other tricks that type designers use in the course of a font. This is the Georgia X. And on the left, you see the classic Poggendorf illusion, where in this illusion, does the line C match up with the line A or the line B? Let's have votes for A. Votes for B? Okay, most people are voting for B. Mathematically, line C and B line up. What you're supposed to say is that line A and line C appear to match up. That is what always happens in psychological tests. And so what type designers do, you guys are being a little bit tricky on me. So what type designers do, will take a letter like S, X that has these crosses, and if they were to make two perfectly mathematical crosses there, it would look misaligned. And so type designers know this and adjust for our tricks of visual perception and take the right upper cross of the X and shift it down a little to give it the appearance of being two crosses, two lines that are perfectly crossing. Now that's in the best case where we've got lots of resolution to play with and what we can do. But on computer screens, we struggle a lot because the typical computer screen is around 100 dots per inch, where when we print something, we're printing at 1,200 or 2,400 dots per inch. And so when we try to take this very nice M that we have at the top and try to put it on screen, we can run into some problems. And so the middle M here is something that we typically would have seen in the 80s quite a bit, where one stem happened to have 2 pixel widths, and the other 2 stems had 1 pixel widths, and the rest of it kind of came out bad. And so we figured out how to eventually make M's that all had 1 pixel widths that basically worked. And that resulted in the original form resulted in text like the one on the top, where the stems are not of equal weight, and you see spacing problems as well. The middle one is kind of where we are today, where we figured out how to get roughly even stem weights, but still quite often see spacing problems. By the way, we do see spacing problems in the real world very often. If you notice the ladies and gentlemen signs in this hotel, you'll see lots of spacing problems. And the one on the bottom is what we strive to get to, is where we've got even stem weights and even spacing between the letters. So one of the technologies that we've developed that's helped us get this far is ClearType. And what ClearType is if you were to take a magnifying glass and put it up to your LCD screen, you discover that you never see any true pixels of white, but rather what we have are 3 smaller, what are called subpixels, of red, green, and blue colors. And when you turn on red, green, and blue, we get the visual perception of seeing white. And if we turn off all 3, we get the visual perception of seeing black. And so in ClearType, what we're doing is taking advantage of these subpixels in order to get some extra resolution, so we can make the stem weights of each of these stems closer to equal. And hopefully people can see the difference between the older black and white text that we commonly saw in ClearType on the bottom. Yes? Okay, good. Next up is the latest versions of ClearType. So the version of text on the top is what's called compatible with ClearType. That's what we see in most of Windows today. It's part of the GDI graphics platform that we've had for a very long time. And on the bottom is subpixel ClearType, where we are taking some of that extra resolution and not only applying it to the stem weights, but also applying it to the spacing between the letters. And we can see this now appears in the new DirectWrite graphics engine in Windows, and IE9 has committed to using it, and for web pages that are standards written with standards base, we should be seeing this kind of text in the soon future. Which I'm looking forward to. Can you guys see the difference between compatible widths and subpixel widths? Is this difference apparent? Some nods, some non-nods. Yes, it is apparent. Okay, good. Good. We've got at least 80% of the audience raising their hand. So yeah, the difference there is we're putting some of the resolution into getting the spacing between letters right, which turns out to be very important for readability. Okay, switching topics slightly. One of the reasons we care about readability so much is that people frequently complain about eye fatigue when they read from computer screens. And who can tell me what causes eye fatigue? Anyone? Maybe what? Refresh rate can cause eye fatigue, yeah? Because you're close to screen, your muscles are contracting all the time. Okay. Anyone else?
Light versus it's giving off light rather than.
Because monitors are giving off light, that causes eye fatigue. Okay. Yeah, that's one difference. This is a tangent. People frequently talk about light being an issue with computer screens because an LCD screen or a CRT has a backlight that is pointing light at you. Interestingly, the eye cannot tell the difference between light that's coming from a backlight that's going right into your eyes or coming from sun or a light bulb and reflecting off a book and coming to your eyes. From your eyes' perspective, those are exactly the same thing. A problem can come, though, from the amount of light coming. That what we want is the amount of light in the environment equal to the amount of light coming from screen. And so if you've got a very bright computer screen in a dim environment, it's more light coming from the screen than coming from your environment, which is a problem, where a technology like e-ink that is a reflective device will have equal amounts of light coming from both, which is what makes that technology desirable. But that was a tangent. So, we've got some ideas about what can cause eye fatigue, and up on screen we have the new Avita Oculizer. And what this is it's a medical device where there are suction cups that you put your eye up to it and create a vacuum so your eye gets kind of sucked into this, and then you can manipulate your eyes by rotating and pushing in and out, essentially giving your eye an eye massage. Is this a good idea? Probably not. We've got raise of hands. Is this a good idea? Yes. Nobody is raising their hands. Is this a good idea? No. Everyone else is raising their hands. Okay. This is still a device that is available. This is an old-timey version of it, but we can get battery-powered versions now because manipulating it yourself is too much trouble. And the idea behind both that version and the battery-powered version of it is that it's the muscles behind your eye that are becoming fatigued when you spend a lot of time reading either from books or from computer screens. And so the muscles that would be improved by this device are these muscles behind the eye that control the movements left, right, up, down, and there are two other muscles there that help us cross our eyes and roll our eyes. And so, if we massage these muscles, can we reduce eye fatigue? Does that sound unreasonable? Not really. So this was tested. People spent time during a 6-hour period of time where they had people read, and we measured what these muscles were doing. This happened in the 1940s, not when I say we, I don't mean me. And measured what those muscles were doing. And it turned out that those muscles are very well built for moving your eye around a book or moving your eye around an environment. That essentially you're using those muscles all day long anyway, whether reading or walking in a forest. And it turns out they're fine. So those muscles are not the muscles that become fatigued during eye fatigue. And so, yeah, the new Avita Oculizer isn't going to help us with computer eye fatigue. So given that, we started wondering, well, what muscles are becoming fatigued when we talk about eye fatigue? And so we started looking at the orbicularis oculi, which is the large muscle that's going directly around the eye on the surface of the face. And that muscle does two things. One, the outer strands of it are involved in squinting, and the internal fibers are involved in squinting, in blinking, sorry. External squinting, internal blinking. And so what we measured what that muscle did as we induced eye fatigue in a number of different ways. And they're kind of cruel and unusual ways that we did things. That we did things like gave people text that was too small to read, gave people gray text on a gray background, put glasses on people that induced refractive error, essentially gave you an astigmatism. Gave people text to read that was much too close to you, and gave people text to read that alternated in distance. All of these things are known to cause eye fatigue, and we did induce eye fatigue, to measure what that muscle was doing. And so we put EMG measures 1 centimeter below the eye on the orbicularis. And what we discovered is during different conditions, that muscle did different things. So under problems like convergence, reading too close, or changing the distance that you're reading, that muscle didn't do anything at all. There was no particular activity going on in that muscle. But during some other conditions, like glare, having a light bulb in your field of view, the astigmatism, low contrast, and low text size, those all did cause that muscle to become very active and indicated it in eye fatigue. But we see that here on this diagram here, that they did different things depending on what kind of strength we added to it. So as we gave more glare and more astigmatism, we see that the amount of activity in that muscle really starts going up, where the amount of activity during low text and low text size and low contrast, it stayed constant. There's a question.
Did you say that's due to involuntary response? I mean, is it the reaction of the subject to...
The question is this an involuntary response or intention? Yes, this is involuntary. Well, With the glare, with something like glare, you are squinting. I'm going to get. Yes, I do it. I'm going to hit it in 2 slides, so I'll come back to that. Any other questions? One in the back.
Does this change with people with things like, what do you call it, reading problems?
Question, does this change with people that suffer from reading problems? Reading problems like dyslexia, or that was not part of the test, but I would not expect so. So most people think of dyslexia as a visual perception problem, but the evidence right now is pointing it towards being phonological, so we wouldn't expect these muscles to behave any different. Anything else? No? Okay, so this is what the muscle did, and this is what we see when we look at blink rate. Blink rate, this surprises some people. When you're engaged in a normal conversation, you have a very high blink rate, roughly around 30 times a second. But as soon as you start reading or doing some sort of close visual task, your blink rate drops off tremendously. And there's a reason for it, that every time you blink, that interrupts the reading process, and you essentially have to reread whatever you were reading when you blinked. And so there's a good reason for blinking. For avoiding blinking during reading, but that is also a problem that can lead to dry eye. So with blink rate, we see that the blink rate will increase as we get more astigmatism and more glare, and blink rate slightly decreases when we give it low text sizes and low contrast. So all in all, what we're discovering is that there isn't one kind of eye fatigue. There's multiple kinds of eye fatigue. And some eye fatigue is not related to these muscles in front, but accommodative and convergence seems to have a different cause entirely. And it also results in different kinds of symptoms. When people have problems with convergence and accommodation, they're usually reporting problems like headaches and pain coming from the back of the head. Where these other 2 kinds of eye fatigue shown here result in problems like dry eye and pain that people report from the front of their face. But even from those, we're seeing that there's at least 2 different kinds. One where you do improve the reading, this comes to your question, where your reading conditions can be improved by squinting. So when you've got a lot of glare, you're going to squint in order to physically block out the glare. And it's under conscious control, but you really just do it involuntary. As soon as you put on imagine driving on a road where there's a lot of light, you squint because you have to in order to be able to see something. And so when you're doing that, it results in a different kind of eye fatigue than when you have problems related to the text directly. So if you have small text or gray text on a gray background, you don't squint as you get smaller text. It's a different issue. And so one of these kinds of eye fatigue is under our control, as web designers. So I strongly recommend not using small text or gray text on a gray background. You are far better off, your readers will be better off if you're using text that is 12 points or and black on white or white on black. Any questions about eye fatigue? No. So who has seen this text that I have up on the board? Most people, excellent. Is this true? Yes? So they make a few different claims here. So we've got a bunch of scrambled letters, and a big point of it is it's amazing that we can read this at all. You can take a bunch of letters, and as long as you're not touching the first or last letter, you can scramble this, and we can read it. And they claim that you can read it without any problem, and that's because we read words by whole word shape. Here are slightly more subtle versions of what they've done. On the top, we've got normal text where it's been unaltered. The second one is where we've altered internal letters, which is the subtle version of what they've done, where we've left the first letter always intact, but sometimes we're alternating a middle letter. And then at the bottom, we've got alternating a final letter and alternating a first letter. So what the authors of that passage claimed was that the normal text and rotating internal letters, you'd be reading those perfectly fine, but if you mess with these first or last letters, we would expect reading speed to be slower for these two conditions. Who thinks if we measure people's reading speed that it's going to turn out like that? We've got 30% maybe. Who thinks it's not going to turn out like that? Maybe another 30%. And we've got a lot of non-votes going on. So Rayner and people did this and found that certainly you read fastest when text is unaltered. But when you alter the middle letters, it does slow reading speed from 255 words per minute down to 227 words per minute. So it's not true. Any sort of change made to the letters does slow reading speed. But it is amazing on the previous one that we could recover it. We are good enough readers, adult readers are good enough readers that you can recover this at all. And it's slowing you down some, but not tremendously. 227 words per minute is still a perfectly fine reading speed. But they were correct that if you alter the first or last letters, that causes reading speed to be heard even worse. So if you alternate a final letter, reading speed was dropping down to 189 words per minute, and if you alternated the first letter, it went even further, down to 163 words per minute. So the key takeaway for this one is that what they were most wrong about is that we recognize words on the basis of word shape. Really what we're doing when we recognize words is taking all the individual letters of the word, recognizing them, and using that information, building that information up into recognizing words. So when we talk about legibility, what we really care about paramountly is how legible is an individual letter. And so when we develop fonts, one of the things that we spend a lot of time with is trying to maximize the legibility of every letter in a font. So up on board, I have two different letters, and these are different fonts than what I show in my slides. Normally, I like to play a game here of who can identify the font. But I cannot identify the right font, so that's going to be hard to play. It's close. It's not a bad substitute, but it's not perfect. So we won't guess which one it is. But what we do have here are one is a serif letter A and one is a sans serif letter A. Do people know the difference between serif and sans serif faces here? We're getting lots of nods. Good, good. So the left one is sans serif and the right one is serif. The right one has a teardrop terminal on the A, a big tail that comes off on the right. And if you look at other letters, you'll see more of the traditional flat-bottomed serif on the ends of straight features. Which is more legible, serif typefaces or sans serif typefaces? We got one answer, it depends. What does it depend on? It depends if on screen or in print, and so which is which? Serif is more legible in print, and sans serif is more legible on screen. Okay. Does everyone agree with that, or are there other theories? Depends on what you're used to is another theory. It could interact with size. One more time? Whoops. Sensory can be used more in larger signs? Sans serif, sorry, can be used more in larger signs. So at large sizes, sans serif works. At smaller sizes, serif is better. Okay. Anyone else? So one of the things that we do in order to test the legibility of different letters is to see what is the smallest size at which you can still recognize it. And so this would be like when you go to a doctor's office and they're measuring your visual acuity, you'll get this eye chart, and the smaller text that you can read, the better your visual acuity is. Imagine if we took this chart and instead of showing the font that was there, we changed fonts, and we measure, can you read to a smaller line now that we've changed the font on you? And what we know is when you can read the text to smaller sizes, when you get text at the regular text reading sizes, you will be able to read that text faster. So there's a connection there between the two. So if we put these two letters into a distance threshold measure, we see what's the smallest text that we can read. Which of these are going to be read down to a smaller size? The one on the left, sans serif, one on the right. Let's take a vote. The one on the left, sans serif? The one on the right, serif? All right, we've got, I'm going to go with 60% sans serif, 40% serif. So here is the data. Now, the letter I was trying to show you on the right, so we did have Verdana on the left there, but the letter I was trying to show on the right was the Bedoni A, but we had something that was of a similar style, but not actually the Bedoni. And what we see here is that Verdana has the highest legibility score. It can be read at the smallest size. And Bedoni, of these 12 here, have the poorest legibility score. Now, we've got 12 fonts here that are all well-known fonts that are all recognized to be legible typefaces. But there is a pretty big difference between some of these. We see that many of the top ones have very similar high scores, but down at the bottom, Din, Futura, and Bedoni all have low scores. And how? So these fonts that are showing on screen are now all wrong. The Futura is kind of well known for having a single bull A. Sorry about this. Ignore the fonts that the names of the fonts and the data is correct, but the visualization is wrong. It is showing the wrong fonts up here. Some of the wrong fonts, some of them are correct. But the interesting thing to notice here is that while we had a sans serif performing at the top and a serif at the bottom, we're not seeing this clear divide that we would have expected, that all the sans serifs are at the top and all the serifs are at the bottom. We're seeing that there is a mix going on, that we've got Din and Futura, which are sans serifs, are at the bottom, and some other serifs like Centaur are fairly high up and doing well. And now we're going to play again, except the fonts are wrong, so this is really bad. Sorry. So what I was going to show was a Centaur S versus the Helvetica S. There's a question over here. This data was collected in print. The on-screen data that we've collected have shown very similar results. But we did it in print, so we'd have the highest possible resolution. Another question. Question is, why is Arial missing? That is more of a political decision than anything. A lot of this data has been targeted towards the type design community that has a strong dislike for Arial. Helvetica is included, which is a very similar design. I would expect Arial and Helvetica to have very similar data, yes. Another question? Question is this, yeah, how hard is it to switch out laptops? I'll boot up my laptop and we'll see if we can get the correct slides up. but we'll just keep going until that happens. So with this S data, what we see is that we're getting the different result, that the Centaur S, which is a serif S, is our top performer, where Helvetica S, which is a very popular, well-known sans serif S, is the bottom performer in this particular data. And so what we're not seeing is any sort of consistency, that for every letter is a unique design and different things can happen, and some serif designs can perform really well for a given letter, some sans serif designs can perform really well for a given letter. So the Futura S is our second best performer, which is a sans serif. And down at the bottom we have Rockwell, a serif S, that is our poorest performer. So the serif versus sans serif distinction is not the key determiner of legibility. I'll take 1 second to try to get the actual slides up here. If I press the laptop button, will that switch it?
Which laptop should come up?
Which one were you on C?
Got it.
Yeah, there you go. Awesome.
All right, so this is the Verdana and Bodoni A. And this is the data with the actual fonts showing. I don't think anything I say actually changes now, but but that's what the data is supposed to look like. And so which of these two S's is going to perform better, the Centaur on the left or the Helvetica on the right? Anyone want to change their guess? And so you're able to see that Centaur and Futura are sans serifs are our top, but Baskerville is third. It's a serif typeface, so it's doing fine. And then down at the bottom, we've got the serif and sans serif, Helvetica and Rockwell. So when we design fonts, and a recent font collection that came out of our team are a bunch of fonts that all start with the letter C. I don't know if you've seen some of these already. They've been shipping for a couple of years now. Constantia, Calibri, Cambria. What we're doing when we design fonts is figure out, okay, what are characteristics of individual letters that make something more or less legible, and try to incorporate that into our fonts, and then simultaneously try to deal with some of the technical limitations of on-screen design. So, for example, this bar here in the G is typically made with kind of a slanted angle to it. But this kind of shallow slant is one that is really hard to show up, it's really hard to make appear good on computer screens because of the low resolution problem. So in all of our fonts, you'll see that we've got a very horizontal bar there instead of a slight shallow angle. And that's just to avoid a computer screen limitation. So that's Constantia, and this is Kendara, a font that I think is quite beautiful, and you can see the same effect in the G here. And so, question for you guys. We've seen that different letters and different fonts can be more or less legible. Is it a good idea to take these different letters, the Centaur S and the Verdana A and whatever other letters perform top, take all of those and combine them into one mega legibility font? We'll call it Frankenfont. Is that a good idea? One person imagines not. Anyone else? I heard a comment over here. It's worth trying, okay. Would think the jarring from one appearance to another would cause more harm than good. So what kind of harm would it cause to have all these letters of different styles all appearing in the same font? It would be ugly. How fast can you read a ransom note is a comment. Wouldn't you get kerning, your spacing between letters, wouldn't that become more of a problem? Probably, yes, that's a problem. It would be a licensing nightmare, yeah, sure. Is there any advantage to having, so this is 4 different fonts up on screen, all with similar styles to it. Is there an advantage to having this similar style, not only within a family, but within a font itself? Is there some utility in this? Or is this just trying to avoid the ugliness of the ransom font? It helps delineate what? Passages of text. Emphasis? Sure, having the different families lets you use italics for emphasis, yeah. This is the latest font that we've made. It's shipped with Windows 7. It's called Gabriel, and it has 8 stylistic sets. At the top level, you can see a font that would be possible to use as a text font for passages of text, down to, at the bottom, a font that is chocked full of swashes and might be appropriate for a wedding invitation, but certainly wouldn't be appropriate for a block of text. This font probably, particularly in the swash form, isn't going to do very well in a legibility test. Should we have made this font? It depends what it's used for. Good point. So I've already indicated that it would be appropriate for a wedding invitation, but perhaps not a block of text. It's more readable than other swirly fonts, but we can probably rule out all swirly fonts as being legible. Well, so I am going to argue that we want these different fonts not because they're maximally legible, but because they do serve different kinds of appropriateness, that we do need wedding invitations and text to have different types of styles to it. And typographers have long claimed that whenever you're going to set a document, a web page, a book, whatever, you need to read that content in order to figure out, what's a font that's going to have a personality that matches it in terms of content. Wrong computer. So, who is familiar with the Stroop test? Many people. At least 20% of people, I'm going to say, were familiar with it. So in the classic Stroop test, what happens is you measure how quickly people can name color blotches. So on the left, you'd have to say that's yellow, blue, red, green, purple. And people are very good at this. And then on the right, you're told to do the exact same thing, just name what color it is and ignore that there's any text there. It's not important. And when people try to read that line of colors, people find it to be very difficult. Do we want to try this as a group? Very quickly, let's read the colors on the right-hand side. 3, 2, 1, go. That is perfectly correct. There was a lot of mumbling and confusion going on as people frequently try to name the word instead of the color. Now, the opposite of that is called the reverse Stroop effect. This effect is not as strong as the classic one, but here we would measure how quickly people can name these words. So you'd say red, purple, green, yellow, blue, and then you do the same on the right, where you name the word and ignore the color. And people are able to do this, but it turns out that people are slower at doing this than reading the list on the right than reading the list on the left. And that's because with anything, we're able to incorporate multiple kinds of information at the same time. So we're able to read the content of the word, but also assimilate the color information. And if those things are matching, that's great. That doesn't hurt us at all. But when these things are different, they don't match, that slows us down. We have trouble integrating these two different kinds of information. So what we're wondering is, can the same thing be true with font personality? And so fortunately, Dawn Shake at Wichita State was working on font personality for a dissertation project. And what she did was to take some 40 different fonts and gave people a semantic differentiation scale, where she asked if a font was stable or unstable, masculine or feminine, and so on. And I'm going to go back a couple of slides. Actually, I'm going to do it with this one. Is this font masculine or feminine? Raise your hand if it's masculine. Raise your hand if it's feminine. 100% of people said feminine. Does everyone in this room naturally think of fonts in terms of masculine and feminine? Apparently, yes. It turns out that when you're given a scale like this one, that people are very consistent in what they determine. This font is masculine, this font is feminine, this font is stable, this font is unstable. Don Shake had measured some 400 people and found people were very consistent at how they rated different fonts. And so we took that kind of data and said, well, okay, Corsiva was determined to be a pretty font, a gorgeous font, a stylish font, where Times New Roman was determined to be a reliable font, a staid font, a constant font. Does that match with everyone's intuition here? Yeah, okay. So, given the Stroop test that we've seen a second ago, would we expect people to be faster at saying words like pretty gorgeous and stylish if they're in Corsiva, and slower if you're trying to read words like reliable, staid, and constant in Corsiva? So that's what we did. The top two are what we call congruent conditions, pretty, matching in Corsiva, and reliable, matching in Times New Roman. And the bottom two are incongruent, stylish in Times New Roman, which Times New Roman is not stylish, and staid in Corsiva, which Corsiva is not staid. And what we find is, in terms of naming speed, people are faster when the conditions are congruent than when the conditions are incongruent. And so we're seeing this awesome Stroop effect related in font personality. And so that suggests that, yeah, when we do, there's an advantage to picking a font that is appropriate, that people are going to be better equipped to read that font if the message and the font are congruent with each other than when the message and font are incongruent. There's a question over here.
Now, why is it more stylish? Because there's more curves?
Question is, why is Corsiva more stylish? Is it because it has curves? That is a hard question to answer, the why. So I can give you a font and tell you what people think it is. I would certainly guess curves are going to play a role in some of the characteristics, but it's all guesses. Yeah, the issue is just we all agree on what it does mean. How we got to that point, I don't know. Did I answer the question? A little bit? Okay. Another question back here. Is this culturally motivated, or is it, I'm going to guess perception is the perceptually motivated is the opposite. I don't know. Highly likely that it's culturally related and could change over time.
Oh, no, sorry. I mean, literally, like, from culture to culture across the planet.
I've only seen data related to Western cultures, so I don't know. It's constant across the U.S. and European cultures we've looked at. So, serif versus sans serif. We've talked about them before, and it turns out that there isn't the giant legibility difference between the two that we saw. But one of the things that came out of Don Shake's data was that there are constant differences on those semantic differentiation scales between all of the serif fonts and all of the sans serif fonts that she looked at. That all of the sans serif fonts were seen as more youthful, casual, and passive, where all the serifed fonts were seen as more mature, formal, and assertive. And so I've got Verdana and Georgia up here as examples of sans serif and serif fonts. But this applied to the other text faces that she looked at as well. And so could this be the key difference between serif and sans serif fonts? And our data as of yet is not perfectly conclusive. So here's the kind of test that we looked at. What's naming speed for these two top conditions, which are congruent conditions, casual in Verdana, mature in Georgia, and incongruent conditions, youthful in Georgia and formal in Verdana. And so what we're seeing is with Verdana, we did get the exact difference that we expected, that casual was read faster than formal, but we didn't see the difference. There was no statistically reliable difference for the Georgia typeface. Now, it's an area that we're still playing with to try to figure out how to measure this precisely. And if you ask me today, I'm going to claim that that's the main difference between serif and sans serif typefaces. But the data is not fully nailed down yet. Anyone have any questions on this, or shall I jump on to my last section? Okay. So, we've been talking about fonts. What about pages? Our team strongly advocates for good typography in general. And so one of the things that we care about is page design. And so we started doing reading speed and comprehension measures on different page characteristics. And so up on screen, we've got two different designs, and which one do you guys like better, the one on the left or the one on the right? Raise your hand if you like the one on the left. Nobody. Raise your hand if you like the one on the right. Everybody. Perfect. So we measured people's reading speed and comprehension and asked people which ones they liked better. And everybody but one person liked the one on the right better. There was one crazy person in the mix. But in terms of reading speed and comprehension, we found absolutely no difference between the two. They were the same, even though on the one on the left, you've got to jump over that image to keep reading. People are good enough readers that did not slow people down in any sort of measurable way. That was a problem for us. And here's another test that we ran, and this is showing some of the features that are, these are called open type layout features that we've been trying to get into our apps for quite a while. And they include, the top one is, well, one of these is good, one of these is bad. Who likes the one on the left? A couple people. Who likes the one on the right? I'm going to say 5% voted for the one on the left and 20% for the one on the right. And lots of people are unclear right now. So the four features that I've highlighted here are the use of small caps, which you can see on the right. And what small caps are caps that have the same stem weight as the rest of the text but are reduced in size. And they create not this large square block on the page that the ones on the left do. So if you had to pick out all of the NCAA, NAACP from the one on the left, it's a little easier to do on the left than on the right because they kind of stand out as a big block. Same kind of feature for the numbers. It's lining numbers versus old-style numerals. Typographers would claim that in paragraphs you need old-style numerals because the ascending and descending characteristics will make it fit better into the page rather than being these large rectangular blocks. Third one is kerning. There's a big gap between the T and the E on the left here where typographers would rather push that in a little bit, and you get the one like the one on the right. And then ligatures is the final one, that there are some letter combinations like this FI that are just a little bit unfortunate, and they come together and they cause your eye to think something's a little askew. So what type designers will do is design special characters like the FI on the right in order to alleviate that problem. So the page on the right has all of these features built into it. The page on the left has none of these features built into it. We had people do this reading speed and comprehension test and then ask people which they liked better. As with the previous test, we found no difference in reading speed or comprehension. But when it came time to the preference test, we got no difference as well. 50% of people chose one page, 50% of people chose the other, where if you show these to typographers, 100% are going to choose the one on the right and say that all of those features are absolutely required. So this is a problem for us. How much reading was it? In this study, we had people reading, these were 800-word passages like SAT passages, and if I recall correctly, they were reading 3 of each passage. For any condition, they would read 3 different passages, and we'd measure reading speed and comprehension multiple times for each person. Question is, why is the old style 8 better than the rest when it's higher? There are other numbers that are higher as well. It's a mix of ascending and descending characters. It's just like, why are there certain ascending letters? The reason they dislike this is that it's this block. If you had to pick out the numbers on this page, it would be easier. It creates this large black spot on the page where they're trying to achieve an even color across the page, and it's better done on the right. So, we didn't like this result. So we thought, well, okay, it seems like good layout is not leading to reading speed or comprehension differences like we thought. But maybe there are some other benefits to it. It does create this more beautiful page that typographers like, and maybe the beauty has some value in it other than reading speed. And so we kind of dug into the literature, and we found this interesting result from Alice Eisen at Cornell, who showed that when people are put into a good mood, and she would put people into a good mood by giving you a small gift like a candy bar or having you watch a humorous video. When people are induced into this good mood, they perform better on certain kinds of cognitive tasks. And one of the tasks is the candle task. And who in the room is familiar with the candle task? No, one person. We've got one person. You don't answer. Okay, in the candle task, what happens is, imagine that there is a cork board fixed to the wall. You've got this cork board, and you're given a candle, a match, and a box full of tacks, and you're told to affix the candle to the cork board in such a way that when you light it, it's not going to drip wax all over the place. Now, most people's first solution to this is to take all of these tacks and to try to build some sort of tray around the candle. And my boss spent a year of lunchtimes drawing on napkins, trying to architect the perfect tray that was going to really capture the wax. And this is what he finally built when I forced him to build one. And so, he built this tray, and then some of the tacks are being used to be able to stick it into the cork board. And what he found is when he lit this, it dripped wax all over the place. This is not the correct solution, but this is everybody's first solution. You've got all these tacks, so that's what you're going to do. Does anybody know what the correct solution is, or have a guess at it? One? Line the top. So build the tray up higher. Put the pins in the top of the candle in a circle formation, or okay? As a rim.
Put a line of tacks and just smash the candle really hard so it sticks and it's
Wait, so you're smashing the candle?
it won't break the candle, it will smash the tacks into the wax. Put a line vertically in the tacks that is showing under.
So you're making a tighter tray.
No, it's not a tray. It's a straight line like this, so the height of the candle, and you just hit it real hard. It's sticking.
I'm not sure I've got a good visual image of this. That's not the answer I'm looking for. Anyone else? Take the wall thing down instead of having it be vertical, put it horizontal. Yes, I've heard that solution, but it is truly attached to the wall in a way that you would need some bolt cutters or something to get it off. The other legal solution I've heard is to cut the wick out, which is also not the intended solution. So the solution you're supposed to come up with is to take this box full of tacks, dump out all the tacks, use 2 of them to tack up the box to the corkboard, and put the candle in the box. That way all the wax stays in there. And so what Eisen had found is that when she gave people a small gift or had people watch a humorous video, they're far more likely to come up with that solution than if they hadn't received a gift or had watched a dry academic lecture. And so what we wondered is, can good typography be the same kind of mood inducer that a humorous video or a candy bar is? And so what we did is we had people read for 20 minutes with this good typography version of the New Yorker, where we're using the New Yorker's fonts and the best hyphenation and justification we can do, or they read the exact same New Yorker but with this terrible typography version where it's Courier and a bitmap version of Courier, and we've added extra space between every word. Now, you're spending 20 minutes reading the New Yorker, which is a pretty pleasant task. It's not so bad, but one clearly has better typography than the other. And what we found at the end are 2 things, actually. One, we found that we got the exact same results that Eisen did on the candle task. People were far more likely to solve the candle task if they had been reading in this good typography condition than the bad typography condition. We also ran another measure where we asked people how long they thought they had been reading, under the theory that time moves quickly when you're having fun, and if you're doing a task and you get interrupted a bunch of times, you'll say that it took a long time. People underestimated in both conditions how long they had been reading. Reading the New Yorker is essentially a pleasant thing to do, but they underestimated by 3 minutes more in the good typography condition than in the bad typography condition. So it's saying that that there are other cognitive benefits to having good page layout that might not show up in reading speed and comprehension. But we wanted to return to these tests that we ran earlier and see, okay, so if we're seeing this kind of mood difference, maybe we can measure this mood difference directly. And so we started looking at the corrugator muscle, which is associated with frowning, and the zygomatic muscle associated with smiling, and had people read these 2 conditions. Again, we found no reading speed or comprehension differences, but we found in the good typography condition on the right that there was less corrugator activity. Now, this isn't super frowning versus non-frowning. This is, you're getting a little more frowning on the one on the right than on the one on the left, but it's measurable so. And that matches, of course, with what people thought was better. People thought that the one on the left was bad and the one on the right was good. Now we went to this one where people couldn't consciously detect any difference between the 2, and there was no reading speed or comprehension difference. Again, we found no reading speed comprehension difference, and people couldn't detect the difference. But we were able to detect the difference by looking at the corrugator muscle, that there was more corrugator activity happening in the bad typography condition on the left than in the good typography condition on the right. So it's showing that we may not always be aware consciously of the good typography, but it is showing up, and there are benefits for it. So here are my big 4 takeaway points for this whole talk. First one is that we are getting this new version of ClearType, and if you write web pages to standards-based in IE9, you should be getting the subpixel ClearType, which is going to be awesome. 2, some of eye fatigue is under our control, and so if we use high contrast text, black on white or white on black being optimal, that reduces eye fatigue, as does using larger text sizes. 12 point is awesome. Number 3 is to choose font personalities that match your content. So there is no one font to rule them all. It's rather, for your particular document, you should be choosing fonts that match the personality that you're trying to convey. So if you're trying to convey a formal, businessy news site, you should be using serif typefaces, which convey formality to it. And if you're designing something for children, Comic Sans might be appropriate, but for almost any other situation, Comic Sans probably is not appropriate. And there were, I think, peanut gallery comments around Comic Sans over here. And the final one is that there are good cognitive benefits for page layout. So there is reason to use good typography and to pay attention to your page layout. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take questions for any amount of time I have left. Put up contacts. Thank you. Yes?
So, talking about web-based applications where you're somewhat limited to a limited font family, because of who has what on their machines, and is there a great difference between like a Verdana and a Helvetica, which seem to be the most?
The question is, because we're limited to the web-safe fonts, is there a great difference between Verdana and Helvetica?
In terms of like ease of read, or like what would you suggest, or what have your findings found with web-based apps?
In terms of ease of reading, in terms of pure legibility, Verdana may be our top font. It is a highly, highly legible typeface. But Verdana and Helvetica do convey different personality types, so I think that has to be considered when you're selecting your typeface. Hopefully, in the near future, we will have the ability to use fonts other than the web-safe fonts. I'm crossing my fingers on that one. Yes?
Do you have the personality profiles of these fonts, like in the help, like when you click on the font name, do you have their personality profile and all the different characteristics?
That is not built into Windows in any way. That is a 2008 dissertation by Don Shake. So I don't imagine that being built into Windows anytime soon, but that would be a fantastic... to some extent, everyone basically understands the font personality. If you just go with your intuition, you're going to come close. But yeah, if we could do something to show off what personalities different fonts have, that would be great.
It seems like it's useful to go the other way. You pick what you want.
It'd be useful to go the other way. Yeah, you say, hey, these are the personalities I'm trying to convey. Tell me what fonts are appropriate. Yes, that would be helpful. Question back here.
In terms of what happened to you earlier, where you put the font that you think you want, and when it actually gets delivered to the user, it's something totally different?
Do I have any? When I swap machine, so yeah, I was counting on a certain set of fonts to be there, and they were not there.
Would it never occur to you to even think about that as a possibility?
So there is a way I hadn't. Within PowerPoint, I can choose to embed all my fonts, and then all the fonts would travel with me. I did not do that because I was naive. Thanks. Question over here.
Specifically with LCD screens, have you seen any research about using a real solid black on a bright white being a little bit worse for reading left along white?
Differences is what differences are there between white on black and black on white?
No, just because of the white is so bright on an LCD screen, if you see anything for people who might use a gray background or like just a shade of gray.
Question is, if the white on the background of an LCD screen is too bright, is it better to use a gray background? That interacts with your environment. So if you imagine taking a laptop outside, for instance, there is no amount of brightness that you can get from the backlight that's ever going to create a reasonable reading experience, just because there is not enough white there. So it depends on what the environment is. In a very bright environment, you're going to want as much white as you can get. In a dim environment, yeah, you do want to match the luminance of the background to the luminance of the environment. It's better to be doing that by adjusting the brightness of the backlight than adjusting the background because the backlight's going to be under the user control. But yeah, if you're in a dim environment, the white light can be too much. You've got to do something about it. Question here.
Do you think the topics you discussed are the most important things for readability, or was it just time needed to talk about like line spacing, word spacing, all sorts of things, right? Is there a reason you chose these topics?
Is there a reason I chose to talk about these topics and not about line spacing and other features that are known to affect?
Are these the most important things you think for readability?
Are these the most important things for readability? That is a good question. A lot of the other questions around line spacing, leading, have been understood for 60 years, both well understood by type designers and typographers, but also experimentally understood for 60 years. It's a good question what's of relative importance. There's no research to be done on what's the optimal line spacing. It's a known answer. I could be talking about it, I guess. I don't know if that makes the most sense or not. It's worth thinking about. Yes? Yeah.
It's related to what you asked, what about justifying versus right or left?
Fully justified text versus left justified text? Is that your question?
Yeah, like instead of having it left align or right, then left justified, because you keep saying that, right? You can't have forced justification because it makes the perfect read. I tend to disagree.
That's a tough question. So getting good engines to do fully justified text is hard. There's a lot of bad, fully justified text out there, and if you're going to do a bad job of it, that's definitely going to be bad, because you're putting in these large word spaces to deal with the justification, where really good H&J isn't going to put in these giant word spaces. So I can say you definitely don't want to do bad hyphenation and justification. Now, is what's better to do a good ragged right or a good fully justified text? In terms of reading speed, I am skeptical that there's ever going to be a measurable difference. I think those two are going to come out very similar. But if you think about it in terms of these last slides, I wouldn't be surprised at all if the fully justified text is seen as more attractive. I don't have that data, though. No. Question third. We'll let it run out of power. Thanks. Yeah.
Regarding font personality matching content, do you have any thoughts or suggestions when the content is formal, like maybe like tax law or tax software, where you're trying to make it more approachable? Any guidance on sticking with formal because of that, or going to go more informal? Some of the readability.
That's a good area. So the question is, if you've got content that truly is formal, but you're trying to make it more approachable, will you make it more approachable by putting it in a more approachable font? That is worth studying. My intuition is no. Something on tax law, you can put it in a Comic Sans, but it's not going to suddenly not feel like tax law anymore.
But if you're trying to, not make it sound like a tax law, but you're and there's obviously.
I think that's a good area to do research in. I don't think there's enough known about that. Yeah.
Here's kind of a similar, do you think then that the word choice and all the other contextual cues override the font's message, I suppose, about personality or something like that? Do you see the font personality as dominant over subservient?
I think of it, so the question is, which is superior, font choice or the word choice? I think it's, if you think about the Stroop test where it's color information, you've got both the color words and the actual ink color. Those two things are both there as two different pieces of information. And if they're congruent, they're easy to deal with. If they're incongruent, they're hard to deal with. And I think the same is true with the text of your website and the font used on the website. If they match, that's great. If they don't match, they're butting heads a little bit. And I don't think one is dominant over the other. I think they can either play nicely together or not play nicely together.
You tried the Frankenstein test?
Did I try what?
The Frankenstein test?
No, I have not created a Frankenfont.
Do you foresee that in the future?
I don't see a Frankenfont in my future, no. No.
One question. I see these as two separate objects that create a weighting, whereas the words would create, like say, 95 or 97% of the message, whereas the font might be able to have another weighting, up or down, moving towards more formal or more or less casual. You could run a test where you have like formal content with one, and then the same content with the very informal font, and then you could see what percentage the font actually affects the total message.
That sounds like a good test worth doing.
I'm curious as if it's 10% or 1 out of 20 or 1 out of 30.
I don't know. Sorry. I think we are done. I'll be around the conference if anyone wants to chat. Thanks.